Welcome to the world of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy the listening. Matthew's heart pounded as he sprinted through the spaceport, his backpack bouncing wildly against his spine. He'd overslept and was now in serious danger of missing his shuttle back to Earth after a semester abroad on Mars University's exchange program. "Wait! Hold the door!" he yelled, seeing the sleek silver craft preparing for takeoff. The ground crew member at the airlock gave him an exasperated look but waved him through. Matthew dove inside, gasping for breath as the door hissed shut behind him. "Cutting it a bit close there, eh?" drawled a blue-skinned alien with 4 arms, peering at Matthew over a datapad. "Yeah, sorry about that," Matthew panted, straightening up. "Thanks for waiting." He made his way down the aisle, searching for an empty seat. The shuttle was packed with a wild assortment of beings from across the galaxy. Matthew's eyes widened as he took in the diversity. Some passengers had multiple limbs. Others sported shimmering scales or translucent skin that revealed pulsing organs beneath. An empty spot caught his eye near the back. As he approached, Matthew realized with a start that his seatmate was strikingly humanoid, aside from her vibrant green skin. She appeared to be dozing, head tilted back to reveal an elegant neck. Matthew cleared his throat. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" The green woman's eyes snapped open, revealing startling golden irises. She arched a brow, giving Matthew an appraising once-over before gesturing for him to sit. "Thanks," Matthew said, stowing his bag and settling in beside her. He extended a hand. "I'm Matthew." She regarded his outstretched palm with amusement before grasping it lightly. Her skin was impossibly smooth and warm to the touch. "Thea," she replied, her voice melodic. "Nice to meet you, Thea. Heading back to Earth?" A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Not quite. I'm bound for the Intergalactic Academy." Matthew's brow furrowed. "I've never heard of it. What do they teach there?" Thea's golden eyes sparkled with mischief. "Oh, all sorts of fascinating subjects. The ins and outs of interspecies relations, you might say." Before Matthew could inquire further, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their departure. As the engines roared to life, Matthew gripped the armrests, his knuckles whitening. He'd never quite gotten used to space travel. Thea noticed his discomfort. "First time off-world?" she asked, her tone gently teasing. Matthew shook his head. "No, but I'm still not a fan of takeoffs, or landings, or the vast emptiness of space, come to think of it." She laughed, a sound like tinkling bells. "Perhaps you're in the wrong line of work then, Matthew of Earth." "Oh, I'm not," he began, but was cut off as the shuttle lurched upward. Matthew squeezed his eyes shut, trying to quell the rising nausea in his stomach. A warm hand covered his own. "Breathe," Thea murmured. "Focus on my voice." Matthew cracked one eye open to find her leaning close, those mesmerizing golden orbs fixed on his face. He inhaled shakily, allowing her soothing tones to wash over him as she spoke of the wonders awaiting them among the stars. By the time the shuttle broke atmosphere, Matthew's breathing had steadied. He realized he was still clutching Thea's hand and quickly released it, feeling heat creep up his neck. "Feeling better?" she asked, looking far too amused. "Yeah, thanks," Matthew mumbled. "Sorry about that. You must think I'm a total rookie." Thea shrugged, a fluid motion that drew Matthew's gaze to the elegant curve of her shoulder. "We all have our quirks. I, for one, can't stand the taste of ryu berries. They're considered a delicacy on most worlds, but to me, they're revolting." Matthew chuckled, grateful for her attempt to put him at ease. As the flight progressed, they fell into easy conversation. Thea proved to be witty and engaging, with a wealth of knowledge about galactic cultures. Matthew found himself hanging on her every word, entranced by both her intellect and her otherworldly beauty. Hours flew by unnoticed until a sudden jolt rocked the shuttle. Alarms blared as the lights flickered ominously. "What's happening?" Matthew shouted over the cacophony of panicked passengers. Thea's brow furrowed as she tapped rapidly at the console embedded in her armrest. "It appears we've been caught in some sort of tractor beam," she said, her earlier playfulness replaced by steely focus. "We're being pulled off course." Before Matthew could process this alarming news, a shimmering portal materialized in the aisle beside them. A towering figure stepped through, easily 7 feet tall, with iridescent scales and piercing black eyes. "Greetings, travelers," the being's voice reverberated in Matthew's mind rather than his ears. "I apologize for the abrupt change in itinerary, but your presence is required at the Intergalactic Academy. Please remain calm and proceed through the portal in an orderly fashion." Chaos erupted as passengers clamored for answers. Matthew turned to Thea, expecting to see fear or confusion mirroring his own. Instead, she looked excited. "Well," she said, rising gracefully to her feet, "it seems your adventure is just beginning, Matthew of Earth. Shall we?" She extended a hand, wiggling her fingers invitingly. Matthew hesitated only a moment before grasping it, allowing Thea to pull him up and guide him toward the shimmering gateway. "Wait," he protested weakly. I have to get back to Earth. My family, my classes." Thea's lips quirked in a mysterious smile. "Sometimes the universe has other plans for us, Matthew. Trust me, you won't regret this." With that, she tugged him forward. Matthew felt a brief sensation of weightlessness, then a dizzying rush of color and sound. When his vision cleared, he found himself standing in a vast atrium unlike anything he'd ever seen. Crystal spires stretched toward a swirling nebula visible through a transparent dome overhead. Beings of every conceivable shape and hue bustled about, their chatter creating a symphony of alien languages. Matthew gaped, trying to take it all in. "Where are we?" he breathed. "Welcome to the Intergalactic Academy," Thea replied, her eyes dancing with poorly concealed glee at his awestruck expression. Before Matthew could pepper her with the 1,000 questions racing through his mind, a holographic figure materialized before them. It cycled rapidly through various alien forms before settling on a vaguely humanoid shape composed of swirling light. "Greetings, new arrivals," it intoned. "Please proceed to the orientation hall for processing and assignment to your courses of study." Thea nodded, guiding a still dazed Matthew through the throng. They passed displays showcasing mind-bending technologies and artworks that seemed to defy the laws of physics. "I don't understand," Matthew said as they entered a smaller chamber lined with glowing panels. "Why am I here? I'm not a student." Thea turned to face him, her expression growing serious. "The Academy doesn't make mistakes, Matthew. If you've been brought here, it means you have potential, talents you may not even be aware of yet. This is a place of learning, yes, but also of discovery, of pushing boundaries and expanding what we believe is possible." Matthew frowned, processing her words. "And what exactly do they teach here? You mentioned something about interspecies relations on the shuttle." A mischievous glint returned to Thea's eyes. "Oh yes, the Academy offers a rather unique approach to galactic diplomacy. We believe that true understanding between species can only be achieved through intimate connection." Matthew's eyes widened as her meaning sank in. "Wait, you don't mean, 'Welcome, students, to Xenosexuality 101, boomed a voice from the front of the room. Matthew whirled to find the chamber had filled with other bewildered-looking new arrivals. At the lectern stood a being that appeared to be made entirely of shimmering tentacles, constantly writhing and reshaping themselves. "I am Professor Zilksnax, and I'll be guiding you through the fascinating world of interspecies pleasure dynamics this semester," the tentacle being continued. Now, who can tell me the 5 erogenous zones common to silicon-based life forms? Matthew's jaw dropped. He turned back to Thea, only to find she had vanished. In her place stood a holographic nameplate identifying her seat as reserved for Professor Thea, Department of Human Studies. Realization dawned along with a wave of mortification as Matthew recalled his clumsy attempts at flirting during their shuttle ride. He slumped into the indicated chair, face burning. "Is there a problem, Mr.?" Professor Zilksnax's tentacles weaved inquisitively in Matthew's direction. Matthews, he stammered. "And no problem, just processing." Zilksnax's appendages rippled in what Matthew hoped was amusement rather than irritation. "Excellent. Now, as I was saying, the key to pleasuring a Venusian sand squid lies in the delicate manipulation of its dorsal filaments." Matthew did his best to focus on the lecture, but his mind kept drifting back to Thea. Had their entire interaction been some sort of test? Was she evaluating him even now? The thought sent a shiver down his spine, equal parts anxiety and something else he wasn't quite ready to examine. As Zilksnax delved into the intricacies of Arcturian mating dances, the door at the back of the chamber whispered open. Matthew glanced over his shoulder to see Thea slip inside, now clad in the sleek white uniform of an academy professor. She caught his eye and winked. Matthew whipped back around, his face flaming anew. What in the universe had he gotten himself into? The rest of the orientation passed in a blur of increasingly explicit xenobiology lessons and get-to-know-you exercises that left Matthew questioning everything he thought he knew about alien physiology. By the time they were dismissed, his head was spinning. Matthew hung back as the other students filed out, still reeling from information overload. "So," came a familiar melodic voice from behind him. "What did you think of your first day at the academy?" Matthew turned to find Thea leaning against the lectern, a knowing smirk playing at her lips. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I think," he said slowly, "that I'm going to need a lot more practice if I want to pass tentacle massage therapy." Thea threw her head back and laughed, the sound igniting something warm in Matthew's chest despite his lingering embarrassment. "Oh, Matthew," she said, golden eyes twinkling, "something tells me you're going to fit in just fine here." As they exited the chamber together, Matthew couldn't help but feel that his life had irrevocably changed course. And despite the absurdity of it all, a part of him was undeniably thrilled by the adventures that surely lay ahead. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of his journey into the strange and sensual world of intergalactic diplomacy. With Professor Thea as his guide, Matthew was about to embark on the educational experience of a lifetime, one that would challenge his preconceptions, push his boundaries, and perhaps even lead to romance among the stars. Matthew stared at the gelatinous blob undulating on the lab table before him. According to Professor Zilksnax, this was supposed to be a simulation of a Jovian gas dweller's reproductive organ. His task, stimulate it to the point of joyous emanation without accidentally dissolving his hands in its corrosive secretions. He glanced around the classroom. His alien classmates seemed to be having varying degrees of success. The four-armed Andromagon to his left was deftly manipulating multiple protrusions simultaneously. Meanwhile, the crystalline being on his right appeared to be communing with its blob telepathically. Matthew took a deep breath and gingerly extended a gloved hand. The moment his fingers made contact, the gelatinous mass quivered and emitted a high-pitched squeal that set his teeth on edge. "Gently, Mr. Matthews." Professor Zilksnax's tentacles rippled in what Matthew had come to recognize as exasperation. "You're trying to pleasure it, not torture the poor thing." Heat crept up Matthew's neck as titters echoed around the room. 2 weeks into his unexpected enrollment at the Intergalactic Academy, and he still felt hopelessly out of his depth. He tried again, attempting to mimic the delicate stroking motion the professor had demonstrated. The blob gurgled ominously. "Perhaps a different approach," a familiar voice murmured close to his ear. Matthew startled, nearly toppling off his stool as Professor Thea materialized beside him. Her emerald skin seemed to glow under the laboratory lights as she leaned in, golden eyes sparkling with barely suppressed mirth. "Remember, Matthew, intimacy is about connection, not just physical stimulation. Try to attune yourself to its energy." Matthew nodded, trying to ignore the way his pulse quickened at her proximity. He closed his eyes, focusing on the subtle vibrations emanating from the blob. Slowly, hesitantly, he began to move his hands in sync with its pulsations. A low, melodious hum filled the air. Matthew's eyes snapped open to see the gelatinous mass undulating in a hypnotic rhythm, its color shifting through a mesmerizing array of pastels. "Well done," Professor Zilksnax exclaimed, appendages writhing excitedly. "A textbook joyous emanation. Perhaps there's hope for you yet, Mr. Matthews." Thea flashed Matthew a proud smile before gliding away to assist another student. He watched her go, a warm glow of accomplishment mingling with something deeper, more confusing. As the class filed out, Matthew overheard snippets of conversation. "Did you see how Professor Thea looked at the human? I heard she requested to oversee his individual studies personally. Lucky bastard. I'd let her oversee my individual studies any day." Matthew quickened his pace, face burning. He'd been trying not to read too much into Thea's attentiveness, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore the growing tension between them. Later that evening, Matthew slouched in an anti-gravity pod in his dormitory, attempting to make sense of his xenobiology textbook. The diagrams seemed to swim before his eyes, appendages and orifices blurring together in a dizzying array. A chime at his door jolted him from his stupor. "Enter," he called, expecting his Arcturian roommate. Instead, Thea glided in, still wearing her crisp white instructor's uniform. Matthew scrambled to sit upright, acutely aware of his own rumpled appearance. "Professor, I wasn't expecting. Is everything all right?" Thea's lips quirked in amusement. "Relax, Matthew. This isn't an official visit. I thought you might appreciate some extracurricular assistance." Matthew's mouth went dry. "Oh, what did you have in mind?" Thea produced a small, shimmering orb from her pocket. "This is a pheromone synthesizer. It can replicate the chemical signatures of various species. I thought it might help you better understand the nuances of alien arousal responses." She placed the orb on a nearby table and tapped it gently. A soft mist began to emanate, filling the air with a subtle, sweetly musky scent. "This particular blend mimics the pheromones of my own species," Thea explained, her voice taking on a husky quality. "What do you feel?" Matthew inhaled deeply, his senses suddenly hyper-aware. The room seemed to tilt slightly, and he found his gaze drawn irresistibly to Thea. Had her eyes always been quite so luminous, the curve of her neck so enticing? "I feel," he swallowed hard, "warm, a little dizzy, and very, very aware of you." Thea nodded, a satisfied gleam in her eye. "Good. Now, observe your physiological responses. Increased heart rate, dilated pupils, heightened skin sensitivity. These are universal indicators of arousal across many species." She stepped closer, and Matthew caught a stronger whiff of her natural scent beneath the synthesized pheromones. It was intoxicating. "Of course," Thea continued, her voice a low purr, "the key to true interspecies intimacy lies in understanding the unique erogenous zones of each race. Her hand brushed Matthew's arm, leaving a trail of tingling warmth in its wake. For example, the sensitive spots on a human are quite different from those of my people. Matthew's breath hitched. Oh? How so? Thea's golden eyes locked onto his. Perhaps a practical demonstration is in order? Time seemed to stretch like taffy as they regarded each other, the air thick with unspoken tension. Matthew leaned in, drawn by an irresistible gravitational pull. A shrill alarm shattered the moment. Thea stepped back, composure snapping back into place like a force field. "Ah, that would be the reminder for the diplomatic reception," she said briskly, all business once more. "You should get ready, Matthew. It's an excellent opportunity to put your lessons into practice." With that, she swept out of the room, leaving Matthew reeling and more than a little frustrated. An hour later, Matthew found himself in the Academy's grand reception hall, tugging uncomfortably at the high collar of his formal attire. Beings from across the galaxy milled about, a cacophony of languages and scents assaulting his senses. He spotted Thea across the room, engaged in animated conversation with a group of dignitaries. She caught his eye briefly and offered a small nod of encouragement before returning her attention to her companions. Matthew sighed, steeling himself to mingle. He'd just taken a step forward when a commotion near the refreshment table caught his attention. Two aliens, one a mass of undulating tentacles, the other a being that seemed to be made of living crystal, were squaring off, their translators struggling to keep up with their heated exchange. "You dare to insinuate that the Cephalon Collective would stoop to such duplicity?" The tentacled being roared, its appendages lashing angrily. "The evidence speaks for itself," the crystalline entity retorted, its facets flashing menacingly. "The Prism Confederation will not stand idly by while you plunder our resources." Matthew edged closer, alarm growing as he recognized the species involved. The Cephalons and the Prisms had been locked in a cold war for centuries. If tensions boiled over here at a diplomatic function, without fully thinking it through, Matthew inserted himself between the two aliens. "Gentle beings, please," he said, forcing a calm he didn't feel into his voice. "Surely we can discuss this rationally." The Cephalon's tentacles writhed indignantly. "And who are you to intervene, tiny flesh creature?" Matthew drew himself up to his full height, channeling every scrap of diplomatic training he'd absorbed over the past weeks. "I am Matthew Matthews of Earth, student of interspecies relations at this esteemed academy, and I believe I may have a solution to your conflict if you'll hear me out." To his surprise, both aliens paused, regarding him with wary curiosity. "The human wishes to mediate?" The Prism chimed, its tone skeptical but not outright dismissive. "Very well. Speak your piece." Matthew's mind raced. What did he know about these species that could possibly help? Then it hit him, an obscure fact from one of Professor Zilksnax's lectures. "Correct me if I'm wrong," he began carefully, "but don't both of your species share a fondness for crystalline resonance harmonies?" The alien's body language shifted subtly, surprise and perhaps a grudging acknowledgement. "Indeed," the Cephalon admitted, "the songs of the cosmic spheres are sacred to us." The prism's facets shimmered in agreement. "It is one of the few points upon which our peoples have ever agreed." Matthew pressed on, gaining confidence. "Then perhaps there's more common ground to be found. What if, instead of fighting over resources, you were to collaborate on a joint venture? A galactic symphony bringing together the unique auditory capabilities of both your races." He elaborated, drawing on bits and pieces of knowledge gleaned from his classes. As he spoke, the tension between the two aliens gradually dissipated, replaced by thoughtful consideration. "A novel proposition," the Cephalon mused, its tentacles curling contemplatively. "Indeed," the prism chimed. "It has potential." Before Matthew knew it, the two former adversaries were deep in discussion, excitedly exploring the possibilities of a collaborative musical project. As they drifted away, still chatting amiably, Matthew sagged with relief. A slow clap from behind made him turn. Thea stood there, golden eyes shining with unmistakable pride. "Impressive work, Matthew. You may have just averted an interstellar incident." He flushed at her praise. "I was just applying what I've learned here. Although I have to admit, I was mostly winging it." Thea laughed, the sound sending a pleasant shiver down Matthew's spine. "Sometimes that's the best approach in diplomacy. Come, I believe this calls for a celebration." She led him to a quiet alcove and procured 2 glasses of shimmering, color-shifting liquid. "A toast," she said, raising her glass, "to unexpected talents and new possibilities." Matthew clinked his glass against hers, acutely aware of the way her fingers brushed his. As he sipped the alien beverage, which tasted like stardust and possibilities, he found himself captivated by the play of light across Thea's emerald skin. "You continue to surprise me, Matthew of Earth," she murmured, her gaze intense. "I think it's time we moved on to some more advanced lessons." Heat pooled in Matthew's belly, equal parts nervousness and anticipation. "What did you have in mind, Professor?" Thea's smile was positively wicked. "Meet me in holodeck 3 tomorrow evening. Wear something comfortable and easily removable." With that tantalizing promise, she melted back into the crowd, leaving Matthew to wonder just what he'd gotten himself into. The next evening found Matthew pacing nervously outside holodeck 3, second-guessing his choice of attire for the 1,000th time. He'd settled on a simple tunic and loose-fitting trousers, hoping they qualified as both comfortable and easily removable. Just as he was considering fleeing back to his dorm, the holodeck doors slid open with a soft hiss. Thea's voice drifted out, warm and inviting. "Enter, Matthew." Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The familiar grid-lined walls of the holodeck shimmered and dissolved, replaced by a breathtaking alien landscape. Massive crystalline formations jutted from iridescent sand, their facets refracting the light of twin moons overhead. The air was thick with the scent of exotic blooms, and somewhere in the distance, Matthew could hear the haunting cry of an alien creature. Thea stood in the center of it all, resplendent in a gown that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. She extended a hand, beckoning Matthew closer. "Welcome to Xyrilia," she said as he approached. "My homeworld. I thought it fitting for your first lesson in the more intimate aspects of my species." Matthew's mouth went dry. "It's beautiful," he managed, though his eyes were fixed firmly on Thea rather than their surroundings. She smiled, a hint of vulnerability showing through her usual confidence. "I'm glad you think so. Now, shall we begin?" What followed was the most exhilarating and terrifying experience of Matthew's life. Thea guided him through the intricacies of Xyrilian intimacy, the sensitive ridges along her spine, the hidden erogenous zones beneath her luminescent skin, the importance of harmonizing one's bioelectric field with their partners. As their lesson progressed, the line between teacher and student began to blur. Matthew found himself responding instinctively, his hands and lips exploring Thea's alien contours with increasing boldness. Her soft gasps and shuddering sighs told him he was on the right track. Finally, as they lay tangled together on a bed of shimmering moss, Thea gazed up at Matthew with wonder in her golden eyes. "Human," she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. "Don't stop." Matthew needed no further encouragement. He poured everything he had learned, not just about Xyrilian physiology, but about connection, about intimacy across the barriers of species, into pleasuring Thea. Her cries of ecstasy echoed across the crystalline landscape as she arched beneath him, her emerald skin glowing with an inner light. In the aftermath, they lay together in comfortable silence, the twin moons of Xerilia casting a soft glow over their entwined forms. Matthew marveled at how right it felt, despite the vast differences between their species. "You're a quick study," Thea murmured, tracing idle patterns on his chest. "I think you may have a bright future in interspecies diplomacy after all." Matthew chuckled, pulling her closer. "Well, I have an excellent teacher." As they drifted off to sleep beneath an alien sky, Matthew couldn't help but feel that he'd found his place in the universe, even if it was light years away from where he'd expected to be. The weeks leading up to the final exam passed in a blur of intense study sessions and increasingly heated practical lessons with Thea. Matthew found himself struggling to focus in class, his mind constantly drifting back to their night on holographic Xerilia. For her part, Thea seemed determined to test the limits of his self-control. She'd taken to accidentally brushing against him in the hallways, her touch lingering just a fraction too long to be innocent. During lectures, she'd catch his eye and slowly, deliberately lick her lips, leaving Matthew squirming in his seat. "Everything all right, Mr. Matthews?" Professor Zilksnax inquired during one particularly excruciating xenobiology lesson. "You seem rather flushed." Matthew mumbled something about the room temperature as titters echoed around the class. From her position at the back of the room, Thea winked, a mischievous smile playing at her lips. Later, as they prepared for another private tutoring session in Holodeck 3, Matthew couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. "Thea," he began hesitantly, "don't get me wrong, I'm enjoying our lessons, but I have to ask, is this standard procedure for all students?" Thea's golden eyes sparkled with amusement. "Why, Matthew? Are you implying that I'm showing you special treatment?" He flushed, stammering. "No, I mean, maybe. I don't know what to think anymore." Thea's expression softened. She reached out, cupping his face gently in her hands. "Oh, my dear human, you still have so much to learn about the intricacies of interspecies relations." Before Matthew could press further, she activated the holodeck program. The grid-lined walls shimmered and dissolved, replaced by a steaming jungle landscape. Massive bioluminescent flora pulsed with alien rhythms, and somewhere in the distance, Matthew could hear the guttural cries of unseen creatures. Matthew's questions evaporated like mist as Thea led him deeper into the holographic jungle. Whatever her true intentions, he was powerless to resist the siren call of discovery, both scientific and personal. The night before the final exam, Matthew tossed and turned in his anti-gravity pod, unable to quiet his racing thoughts. What if he froze up? What if he accidentally offended some important dignitary with an ill-timed gesture? What if... A soft chime interrupted his spiral of anxiety. He fumbled for his datapad, squinting at the incoming message. "Can't sleep either? Meet me on the observation deck." T. Heart pounding, Matthew threw on some clothes and slipped out of his dorm room. The corridors of the academy were eerily quiet at this hour, the soft hum of life support systems the only sound. He found Thea on the observation deck, a vast, transparent dome offering an unobstructed view of the star-studded vastness of space. She stood silhouetted against the cosmic panorama, her emerald skin seeming to glow with an inner light. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she murmured as Matthew approached. "No matter how many times I see it, the majesty of the universe never fails to take my breath away." Matthew nodded, though his eyes were fixed firmly on Thea rather than the stellar display. "Yeah, beautiful." She turned to face him, her expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Matthew, I need to tell you something." His pulse quickened. "What is it?" Thea took a deep breath. "The truth is, I've never done anything like this before. Getting so involved with a student. It's not exactly against academy regulations, but it's certainly frowned upon. Matthew's heart sank. Oh, so you're saying we should stop? No, Thea exclaimed, surprising them both with her vehemence. She composed herself, continuing more softly. No, what I'm saying is, this isn't just about your education anymore. At least, not for me. Hope blossomed in Matthew's chest. Thea, are you saying? She silenced him with a kiss, fierce and passionate. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Thea's golden eyes shone with an emotion Matthew hadn't dared to name until now. I'm saying, she whispered, that whatever happens tomorrow, whatever the future holds, I want to face it together. If you'll have me, that is. Matthew's answer was to pull her close, pouring all his pent-up feelings into another searing kiss. As they came together beneath the canopy of stars, he silently thanked whatever cosmic forces had led him to this moment. The morning of the final exam dawned bright and clear. Matthew stood before the imposing doors of the Academy's grand auditorium, nervously straightening his formal attire. Inside, he knew, waited a panel of the galaxy's most esteemed xenobiologists and diplomats, all eager to judge whether he was worthy of joining their ranks. Ready to dazzle them, lover boy? Matthew turned to find his Arcturian roommate, Zix, grinning at him with all four of their mouths. As ready as I'll ever be, Matthew replied, managing a weak smile, though I still can't believe they're making us demonstrate our skills in front of an audience. It feels so, I don't know, voyeuristic. Zix's tentacles rippled in amusement. Welcome to Galactic High Society, my friend. Now go in there and make Earth proud. With a deep breath, Matthew pushed open the doors and stepped into the auditorium. Tiered seating rose on all sides, filled with a dizzying array of beings from across the cosmos. At the center stood a raised dais, currently occupied by a pair of silicon-based life forms engaged in what appeared to be an elaborate mating dance. Matthew took his place among the other nervous students, scanning the room for a familiar face. He spotted Thea in the front row, looking resplendent in her formal instructor's robes. She caught his eye and offered a small, encouraging nod. One by one, the students were called to demonstrate their newfound skills in xenosexuality and interspecies diplomacy. Matthew watched, alternately impressed and mortified, as his classmates navigated delicate cultural protocols and alien erogenous zones. Finally, a booming voice echoed through the auditorium. Matthew Matthews of Earth, please take the stage. On shaky legs, Matthew ascended the dais. He bowed to the panel of judges, trying to recall the proper gestures of respect for each species represented. Mr. Matthews, intoned an elderly Vulparian, her fox-like features inscrutable. You will now demonstrate your proficiency in interspecies intimacy. Do you have a volunteer partner, or shall we assign you one? Matthew's mouth went dry. He hadn't even considered this part of the exam. Before he could stammer out a response, a familiar voice rang out. I volunteer. A collective gasp rippled through the audience as Thea gracefully ascended the steps to join Matthew on the dais. Whispers erupted, and Matthew could see several of the judges exchanging meaningful looks. Professor Thea, the Vulparian judge said, her tone neutral but her tufted ears twitching with interest. This is highly irregular. Thea met the judge's gaze unflinchingly. With all due respect, Madam Chancellor, I believe I am uniquely qualified to assess Mr. Matthews' skills. After all, I have overseen much of his private instruction. More whispers, some scandalized, others amused. Matthew felt his face burning, but Thea's steady presence beside him kept him grounded. The Vulparian considered for a long moment, then nodded. Very well, you may proceed. Heart pounding, Matthew turned to face Thea. She gave him a small, reassuring smile. "Remember your training," she murmured. "But more importantly, remember us." With that, she initiated the traditional Exurilian greeting, her fingers brushing Matthew's temples in a gesture that was both respectful and startlingly intimate. He reciprocated, allowing muscle memory to guide him through the intricate dance of cultural protocols. As they moved together, the rest of the world seemed to fall away. Matthew lost himself in the familiar planes and curves of Thea's body, his touches confident and sure. He wove together techniques from a dozen different species, drawing gasps and sighs of pleasure from his partner. Thea responded in kind, her emerald skin beginning to glow with that otherworldly inner light. The air around them crackled with bioelectric energy, and Matthew could hear murmurs of appreciation from the audience. Building to a crescendo, Matthew employed his secret weapon, a maneuver he discovered quite by accident during one of their study sessions. His fingers danced along a particular constellation of nerve clusters just beneath Thea's left shoulder blade, while simultaneously humming a specific frequency that resonated with her species' unique biology. The effect was explosive. Thea arched against him, her golden eyes flying wide. A keening cry of ecstasy tore from her throat, echoing through the stunned auditorium. Her skin blazed with light so intense, Matthew had to squint against its radiance. When the glow finally faded, Thea slumped bonelessly against Matthew's chest, trembling with aftershocks. He held her close, suddenly oblivious to their audience as concern for his partner overrode all else. "Thea," he whispered, "are you all right?" For a long moment she said nothing. Then, to Matthew's shock and delight, she began to laugh. It started as a low chuckle and built to a full-bodied, joyous sound that seemed to fill the entire auditorium. "Oh, Matthew," she finally managed, gazing up at him with eyes that shone with more than just afterglow. "I do believe you've rendered me speechless." A smattering of applause broke out, quickly swelling to a thunderous ovation. Matthew looked out at the sea of alien faces, many wearing expressions of awe, others grinning broadly, those species capable of grinning at least. The Vulparian judge cleared her throat, whiskers twitching with what Matthew could have sworn was amusement. "Well, I think it's safe to say that Mr. Matthews has more than demonstrated his proficiency. Unless there are any objections, I move that we award him full marks and official certification as an interstellar diplomat with a specialization in xenosexuality." The motion passed unanimously. In the days that followed, Matthew found himself something of a celebrity at the academy. Students and faculty alike sought him out, eager to discuss his unorthodox exam performance and groundbreaking techniques. But he had eyes only for Thea. They spent every spare moment together, alternating between long talks about their future and passionate explorations of each other's bodies. It came as no surprise when Thea offered Matthew a position as her teaching assistant for the upcoming term. What did surprise him was her next proposition. "I've been thinking," she said one evening as they lay tangled together in her quarters. "Why limit ourselves to the academy? There's a whole galaxy out there, full of beings who could benefit from our unique approach to diplomacy." Matthew propped himself up on one elbow, intrigued. "What did you have in mind?" Thea's eyes sparkled with excitement. "I'm proposing a research expedition. We'll travel to the farthest reaches of known space, studying the mating habits and intimacy rituals of undiscovered species, all in the name of science and galactic harmony, of course." "Of course," Matthew agreed, grinning. "When do we leave?" And so, mere weeks after his graduation, Matthew found himself aboard a sleek research vessel. The vast expanse of unexplored space stretched out before him. With Thea by his side and adventure on the horizon, he couldn't imagine a more perfect future. As they prepared for their first jump to hyperspace, Thea turned to Matthew with a mischievous smile. "You know," she purred, "I've always wondered about the effects of faster-than-light travel on certain intimate activities. Care to help me conduct an experiment?" Matthew laughed, pulling her close. "In the name of science? Always." The ship's engines thrummed to life, and they shot off into the unknown, leaving a trail of stardust and possibility in their wake. Epilogue. 2 years later, Matthew and Thea stood hand in hand on a pristine beach of some far-flung alien world. Gathered around them was an eclectic assortment of beings from across the galaxy, friends, colleagues, and a few of the more interesting species they'd encountered on their travels. As the planet's 3 suns set in a spectacular array of color, Matthew and Thea exchanged vows. It was a ceremony that incorporated traditions from a dozen different cultures, a testament to the bridges they'd built and the understanding they'd fostered. Their union was sealed with a kiss that sent bioluminescent waves cascading across the shoreline, a phenomenon that would keep xenobiologists puzzled for years to come. As the celebration stretched into the night, Matthew found a quiet moment to gaze up at the star-studded sky. He marveled at the twists of fate that had led him here, to this moment, to this incredible life. A warm hand slipped into his, and he turned to find Thea smiling up at him. "Happy?" she asked. Matthew pulled her close, his heart full to bursting. "Ecstatically," he replied, "though I do have one question." "Oh. How exactly are we going to explain all this to my parents back on Earth?" Thea's laughter rang out across the alien beach, a sound of pure joy that seemed to resonate with the very stars themselves. Dear listener, as we conclude this tale of interstellar romance and unconventional diplomacy, we hope you've enjoyed this journey through the cosmos. Remember, in a universe vast beyond imagining, love truly knows no bounds, be they of species, culture, or even biology. And who knows? Perhaps somewhere out there, among the countless worlds spinning through the void, there's a green-skinned beauty or a charming earthling waiting to sweep you off your feet, or tentacles, or anti-gravity pods. Until then, keep your hearts and minds open to the wonders of the universe. And if you happen to find yourself abducted by aliens, well, you might just be in for the adventure of a lifetime. Safe travels, and may your own intergalactic love story be written in the stars.